Assalamu alaikum everyone.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम तारिक साहब, क्या हाल है आपके?
Alhamdulillah, I'm all fine. How are you?
ठीक ठाक।
Good.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Hi, Tariq, Hadia.
Wa alaikum assalam. How are you, Lana?
I'm good.
Hi,
Thank
Lana.
you. Hi, Hadia. Nice to see you. Tariq, you were having a busy day today, just getting back to your office?
Yeah, my driver got sick, so I had to pick all the kids from schools.
Oh, okay. You had pickup duty.
Yeah. Yeah,
No.
since 1 o'clock.
Oh my gosh. It's funny. I was thinking today how so used to I am seeing people on Zoom, because I saw you yesterday when I was walking to go for a run, and I had to do a double take because I'm so not used to seeing people in the flesh in person. It's like, oh, that's fine. You should say hi, but it's so refreshing to see people around, to see students and everything. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but
It's really refreshing. It's really good to see them back.
yeah. I feel like it's even bringing more faculty out, right? Because I mean, people are out and about going to their offices, even if they were before, but now it's like, okay, we kind of get the signal that, okay, it's okay to meet in person or to do those things. So it's just a breath of fresh air. So let's hope we can all stay safe and stay healthy and keep the good thing going, right? That we have. Yeah, so good. Mishail, are you there, or is it Fatma?
Hi, Dr. Lana, it's me, Fatma.
Oh, okay, Fatma. Fatma, can you maybe just, we don't have to record just yet. Do you mind just pausing it, and then
Yes.
You'll have to remember though, because I am at the recording. There we go. And we'll get started here. So I am just putting up a slide here really quickly, because I'm gonna just start us off today. It's just my absolute pleasure to welcome everybody here. And I'm assuming there'll be more people kind of joining us as we go. For our second iteration of the Teaching Showcase, brought to you by the LMS Learning Institute. We had a great success with our first run of this in the semester, in the spring semester. And we thought this would be a great opportunity to kick off the new school year with, just some ideas for inspiration for those who are looking to shake up their teaching a little bit, either big or small. Well, that's why we're here. So before we start, I know there's some new faces here. There's even some people here who don't really know a lot about what the Learning Institute does. So I just want to take a few minutes just to do that little plug about who we are and what we do. So the Learning Institute, we were created in 2019 and then officially got our beautiful space in the academic block in 2020. And we're basically here to support what you see here is supporting and modeling evidence-based pedagogical practices, purposeful collaboration with students, strategic growth and enrichment around technology, but also in supporting teaching excellence here at LMS and beyond, both around technology and also leading edge evidence-based research, teaching practices. We're also here to support and conduct innovative pedagogical research that not only enhances what we're doing at the university, but responds to teaching and learning challenges and practices that we see out there as well. And also we are starting to play this role more and more around enhancing LMS's reputation as a national and continental leader in integrating research and teaching with learning. So that is all done through the LMS Learning Institute through some of our programs and initiatives. So I thought I'd just take a minute to share that with you for those who aren't familiar. So this is just a grouping of all the initiatives. conducted under different program areas, but I won't get into that right now. But I thought for the purpose here, we would just talk about everything as the ways in which we're helping people to develop teaching at LUMS. So we have something, what we call Course Design Express, that's offered once a semester, a couple times in the summer. It's a self-paced course for faculty who want to redesign or design new courses. It's gotten a lot of good, positive feedback on that. We have instructional skills training workshops, 3-day intensive workshops, sometimes offered 3 days in a row, sometimes offered 3 days over 3 weeks to help faculty, graduate students, staff develop their core instructional skills. We do from time to time more specialized workshops. Some of you have attended our workshops on MCQs, on teaching statements, feedback from students, assessment. So we always try to continue to offer some of those each semester. And based on feedback we get from faculty about what they're looking for. One area we're particularly proud of is how we have been working with TAs for the last year as well. So we run a TA training seminar every semester just before the semester starts. And that has resulted in some interesting research that our team, Fatima and Mishael Sodaman as well, have been involved in really surveying the landscape at LUMS around what TA needs are, both from the TA, the student and the faculty perspective. So we have a guidebook coming out for that, that'll be accessible to everyone. Pedagogical research and fellowships, and the asterisks beside those just mean this is something, the research is something we are doing internally as faculty who are involved in the Learning Institute. But that is something we want to now be working on in the next year to bring out to other instructors at LUMS and people who are interested in starting to do some research around teaching and learning in their disciplines. And our aim is to develop a fellowship program around that so people will get some support, not only capacity building, but also funding around that as well. So stay tuned for that in the future. Another program we're very proud of is the Student Faculty Partnership Program. Some of you here have been involved in that or will be in the future. And it's where students partner with you to support the design of your course or maybe the delivery of your course. So you get some student perspective and insight, really an expertise that we as faculty don't have, is the student, perspective on your courses. One more new initiative that just launched this year was the VC's Award for Teaching Excellence, in an effort to elevate teaching and celebrate outstanding practice here at LUMS. We're very lucky that we have 4 VC Teaching Award winners with us today, sharing their practices with you. And but everyone here is definitely, were chosen because you're an outstanding teacher and have a lot to share with us about the impact you're making on students. And finally, the last bit that the Learning Institute has been somewhat involved in is the revised tenure and promotion standards, where we're trying to elevate the role of teaching at LUMS, and we've come up with LUMS-wide criteria for teaching effectiveness and excellence. So a new institute, but we've been really trying to do a lot to support this initiative around elevating the role of teaching excellence. So that's enough for me on that. And I just want to say, if you're a grad student, these opportunities are for you. If you're faculty, if you're adjunct, teaching fellow, please email us if you have any more questions, or if you want us to keep your name on our list, and we can let you know when things are coming up. Okay, so before I jump in and turn this over to the presenters, in preparing for this, I went back to the white paper that our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Arshad Ahmad, wrote in 2019 about the role of teaching at LUMS. And, he put the call out there right in front of us, and that was the need for the elevation of curricular and pedagogical innovation so that research and teaching can be inextricably intertwined and fueled by that same spirit and practice of innovation. So everyone, please welcome our 5 presenters / outstanding LUMS instructors who are here to share with you today in that spirit of innovation and, you know, helping out one another, thinking about more what is possible in the classroom to help support student experience. So join me in welcoming them. Little harder to do, I guess, online, but you can use your little hand clapping icons there. And so how this is going to work, everyone, is the presentation order is right in front of you. So we are going to start out with Dr. Hadia, and each presenter gets between 5 to 7 minutes to present on what they're going to present on today. They were asked to pick a teaching strategy or assessment strategy to share with you, tell us about the impact on student learning. After that presentation, it's open to you, our guests, to ask questions or you know, ask them if you need other examples of their practices and things like that. So it's over to you, and I'll just be moderating the session. So without further ado, I'll stop, and Dr. Hadia, over to you. You should be able to share your screen.
Great, thank you, Lorna. Let's see. Right, Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you, Lorna, for that fantastic introduction, and thank you to LLI for including me in today's session. I've been doing the LLI workshops for a while, and a lot of what I am going to be talking about today actually comes from the instructional skills workshop that Lorna, you gave us pre-pandemic, and I really can't recall exactly which year it was. I think everything is just merged together because of the pandemic. So what I just want to talk about today is setting up objectives and how that sort of bleeds through my lecture and how that helps me organize. So I'm just going to talk about the end places in my lecture. So just opening and closing my lectures. So right towards the beginning of the instructional skills workshop, we talked about setting up objectives and setting the stage for the entire lecture. And when I set up my lecture, when I'm actually writing my lecture, I usually start off with an objective slide. So I've been teaching for at least a decade now at LMS, and a lot of the course material that I cover, it's material that I'm very familiar with. So I write the objective slide. And inevitably, as I build my lecture, what happens is that I realize that my objective slide, the first slide that I've written, doesn't really gel very well with the rest of what I'm writing, the thought process that's going through. And counterintuitively, that ends up helping me a great deal, because by writing that objective slide towards the beginning and revising it as I go along, as I make my lecture, it helps me figure out what I need to include in one particular week as opposed to another week. So just from my own personal perspective, having that objective slide, which lays out what I'm going to be covering in the lecture, writing it towards the beginning and revising it as I move along with my thought process, really helps me structure my material. What Lorna taught us, and we went through a number of iterations of this throughout our workshop, was that we need to use action-oriented words. And I always try and do that. Through active verbs, I try and convey to the students what it is that they need to be achieving by going through the lecture. And given that I teach economics and there is a lot of assessment that we do, assessment which is based on the material that we cover, which we're trying to understand whether the student has really grasped the concept and the theory, what I try and do through the use of my action words is that I try and give clues as to what it is that I'll be testing. So through usage of demonstrate by making graphs or demonstrate familiarity with through the use of equations, things of that sort, I make it very clear to the students what it is that they should be taking away from by the end of the lecture. Related to my top slide, then I have a last slide in my lecture. And what I hope is by the time the students come to the last slide, they would have achieved all of the objectives. So I really tell my students about this, that you should be using the last slide within the lecture to actually go back to the objectives and see whether or not you've achieved all of the objectives that I listed. So if I try and keep my objective slide really short. So I have maybe 2 or 3 objectives that I want the students to achieve by the end of the lecture. And then at the end of the lecture, I'll give them 3 questions or 3 exercises that they want to do. I also try and put in key takeaways, which I want them to think about, hopefully even after they finish the lecture, that they're doing some other course. So maybe some key takeaways that they think about from a policy angle that they can then use in other courses as well. I mean, that's the dream as far as I'm concerned, that they create connections across the courses, across the different disciplines that they're doing while they're at LMS. And then of course, the questions that are at the end, the points that I give my students at the end, it's really there to help them review, to help them prepare for the exam, to help them prepare for the test, to make sure that they really fully grasp the theories or the concepts that I've discussed in my lectures. I also wanted to talk a little bit about some strategies that I've been using. I've learned again through the workshops at LLI to engage students. And a lot of these strategies I've been using a lot in my online lectures, because it's just so much easier to, for example, conduct polls during Zoom. But at the same time, I also use these in my in-person lectures. And there's some things that I want to use that I've come up with, or I have been using much more intensively during the Zoom lectures in the physical setting, and see how it plays out. So the first thing that I have done in the last year or so is actually just use a lot of these images that I get off of Google. And so Shutterstock images, I use a lot of them. And generally, I find that it sparks students' interest to have these visuals accompany a lot of the so-called drier theories that I'm going through. And I try and find images that really speaks to the narrative that I am trying to get across. Polls really help me. So just a quick poll that I do with the student right then and then, it really helps me figure out who's understood what. And then it helps really spark a discussion with the class based on the poll. It also helps using the polls. I can also give them practice for exam questions. Again, a lot of the material, a lot of the assessment that we end up doing in more core economics courses is MCQ based. So it really gives them a feel for the kind of MCQs that we're going to be assigning for them. And then because I teach applied economics courses a lot of the times as well, development economics courses, I give them a lot of policy questions. So really make them think through the policy angle, really make them think through how would you apply this theory on the ground. I usually throw up a question for them on a slide which relates the theoretical aspects to the ground realities, and really see how they react to what I've provided for them. And it really usually sparks a very interesting discussion. And I actually end up learning a lot from my students during those discussions. They bring a different perspective to how I'm thinking about certain concepts. And I really enjoy doing all of these. That's really all I'm going to say today. And thank you very much for listening to me. And thank you, Lorna, for inviting me today.
Well, thank you very much, Hadia. Great way to kick us off here. Lots of things for us to kind of chew on and think about. I want to open up. We have a few minutes for questions for Hadia. If there's anything that that you have to ask, if you want clarification on, or other examples of, I'm sure she'd be thrilled to answer.
Hadia, do you run these polls right there and then during the lecture?
So I generally set up a question beforehand, and Zoom allows you to input the question beforehand, and I could just throw it up. So, I mean, I don't type it out while I'm in the lecture itself. I usually think of it beforehand and put it in my Zoom class, and then I just throw it up for my students during the lecture itself.
And this helps you devise, multiple choice quizzes or things like that?
Well, the students are always asking me for practice exams or practice tests. So a lot of times I use this to give them practice of questions within the class itself.
Thank you.
So I think Hadia is talking about the poll feature in Zoom, which maybe most of us are familiar with as well. And just before we move on though, is anyone else familiar, or do you use other polling features, and for what purpose in your online classes or in-person classes actually?
So Ilona, is that directed at me, the question?
No, sorry, it was more directed at the whole group, but if you
Okay.
have as well. I'm just curious if there's other, if people aren't using Zoom, for example, if people are going back into in-person classes, what are some of the ways we could transfer what you've been doing online into an in-person class? So, and I guess Zubair is going to talk a little bit about maybe some polling and that kind of thing as well. So,
Well, I do classroom discussions. And so what I learned was this discussion room at the end of each lecture while we were teaching online. And that is what we are going to implement in our in-person classes as well. So at the end of each class, we'll have 5 to 10 minutes where students will be grouped into different clusters, and then they will tell what they have learned in that particular lecture, so that they remain attentive, and I will also be able to see my learning outcomes, which I had in my mind, how much I could deliver to the students.
Excellent. Thank you, Tariq. So Hadia, one more question before I let you off the hook for now. And actually, if anyone has questions for Hadia later, we might have a few minutes at the end to circle back. So keep those in mind. Hadia, I was just wondering, in all these excellent initiatives that you've been making with your class online and in person, have you heard from the students at all whether what you're doing is helpful or not? Is it making an impact? For example, the way you're bookending your lectures with like certain slides and some of the tools you're using?
So the thing is that the students who reach out to are usually the ones who are either really happy with your course or doing, like, they really enjoyed the material that you gave or the strategies that you use, or then they're really unhappy with your course. So they really did not gel well with what you had thought of, or the strategies that you were using in that session. So I don't know what this says, but I have heard from some students, and they've generally really enjoyed the discussion points that I've used. So I usually end up having at least, so what I do is in my course outline for each module, I keep policy-oriented questions, so that to help them figure out what it is that they need to be focusing on, what is the big picture that they need to be looking at. So the course outline itself has some policy questions. And then I have at least one question per week, a policy question with them and a broader discussion with them. And that seems to help students just sort of think about what is happening outside the classroom, what is happening to lower income households within Pakistan, for example. So that seems to be working well. But then, yeah.
Excellent. I think like you're hitting on something we know probably from our own personal experiences of teaching, of doing those things, or if you're into reading, the research literature on teaching excellence, that when we make learning valuable or connected, when we're able to connect to students' personal lives or what they value or what they think is interesting, current events. I know Ali, who's just joined us. Welcome, Ali. I know you do that a lot in your teaching as well and in your assessments, and we're excited to hear about that later, but that really does make a difference. So that's a really key takeaway from me, Hadia, about what you're saying in this session. So thanks so much, Hadia, and we will come back to you a little bit later if we have more questions. Thanks so much. So let's move on to Zubair. Zubair from SSE, Electrical Engineering, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Lana. So lecture plans are important, as Hadia said. So maybe I can start with an outline. I hope you can see my screen. Yeah, so I will talk about three things. And the first thing is how can we give meaning to maths in classes? And how can we use technology to eliminate fear of maths and equations? And how can we use technology to engage with the students? Maybe I can start with my story. Around 6-7 years ago, I entered a classroom and I had to teach the concept of Fourier series. I started writing equations on the board. The first equation had an integral, and the second equation had a Greek summation sign. And when I turned around after writing these equations, the students were staring at me. I could sense that they had the fear of maths. And I believe those of you who teach math intensive courses must have experienced something like this. So even students with strong mathematical foundations, we feel that they are overwhelmed when there is too much mathematical information at once. Question: how can we handle this? How do I handle this? The strategy that I follow is so-called giving meaning to maths. I use geometric interpretation and visual representation to carefully structure the building of mathematically complicated concepts. So maybe I can illustrate you with one example. So this is from my course on a recent course on machine learning. So we teach this concept, so-called the curse of dimensionality. This is a mathematically a deep concept, and it involves very complicated equations. But when I teach these concepts, I start with a one-dimensional representation, two-dimensional representation, and then a third-dimensional representation. So before throwing in any of the maths, so we just give them these illustrations to show that for an exponentially large number of cells, we need large amount of data so that we can fill the space. So without any maths, we just create meaning of maths so that they have a prior understanding. And then after giving meaning to maths with some geometric interpretation, we can present the rigorous mathematics or the actual meat. And what I have felt that the students in a better position to grasp the complicated maths, and this way we can eliminate the fear of maths. What I also do is I use simulations and I use demonstrations to eliminate fear of maths and equations. So what I do is, for example, if I'm teaching a mathematically intensive concept, so we start with giving meaning to maths, then you present rigorous mathematical equations. And then to make the overall learning more coherent, so I show them the simulations. And when I run simulations and I ask my students to suggest some parameters of simulations. And what you expect, they must be throwing some random numbers. And there's a possibility that we observe some unexpected results. And when we observe unexpected results, students can relate back to what they have studied in theory. And this way, they can reinforce, so this practice can reinforce the concepts they have studied in theory, and they can relate back. And this consequently develops a deeper understanding of the mathematical concepts. For example, for the same concept, probably I will skip this, but I run these simulations in class to develop better understanding of the same concept. So I use technology to eliminate fear of maths and equations, and I give meaning to maths so that they can understand the rigorous concepts without any fear. Next, I would like to talk about how can we use technology to engage students. So Hadia has said about this, how can we use live polls to engage with the students. So I use polls to amplify classroom discussions, participations, and understanding of the students using these polling tools. In my classes, I have used Zoom poll, and I also use poll everywhere, which sometimes we call it pollev.com. So they have very good polling software. And so what I do is, so after teaching a concept, I post 2 to 3 questions on screen, if in person, or in the Zoom setting. And then I ask them to respond to a poll anonymously. So I do not use polling for assessment. So I ask them to respond anonymously using their smartphone or using their laptop. And then once I collect the responses, I show the responses on the screen. And if most of the students could respond correctly, I quickly review the concept again, and we're done with the concept. So this gives me a feeling that students had a better understanding of the concept. And if I feel that most of students do not provide the correct answer, I take a step back and I revisit my approach, and then I can explain the concept again, and I can clarify. I can also take their feedback that why did they choose this option. Okay, what is the advantage of this using Poll EV? So the first thing is we are collecting responses anonymously. So students do not fear whether they are being assessed or not. So they can, everyone can respond. So we can have participation from all of the participants. And the second thing is we can gauge the level of understanding of the whole class at once. And this gives instructor a feeling that what is going on in the students' minds. So yeah, so that's all from my side. So we can use geometric interpretation or visual representation, live simulation and demos to eliminate the fear of maths. And we can use this polling technique to engage with the students. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Zubair. Let's give him our virtual hands there, reactions. Thanks a lot, Zubair. That's wonderful. I'll open it up to our participants first. If you have any questions, we have a few minutes for questions for Zubair. And if not, I do, of course, have a few questions for you. I'm curious if any non-math instructors, faculty on Zoom today have any questions for Zubair. Because I think you taught us, you had a lot of great examples here of things that we could do in our own classes, Zubair, and how you've used them in math. I'm just wondering if anyone has any kind of questions from the perspective of their own disciplines. You can either raise your hand or just jump in, it's fine. Antonio, go ahead.
Yeah, mine is not a question, rather a comment, which is, I noticed he showed the geometric representation and also the simulation, but he accurately skipped showing that, rigorous math to us. So not to scare us about the mathematics behind that.
Yeah.
A great in the moment pedagogical choice right there. You were reading your audience maybe, or okay, other questions from our group? Okay, well, I'll ask one while you are all thinking. Zubair, I'm wondering if there's two questions for you. The first one is, you say using diagrams, demos, make students, I guess, have less fear about math. Can you, like, what is it about the diagrams themselves that make them have less fear about math, right? Than if you just, I mean, there's lots of ways we could help someone not have fear, but what is it for you as a strategy? Diagrams, simulations, how does that work in terms of eliminating or lessening fear?
Lorna, I think the key message here is we should not throw in information at once. So we should structure it carefully so that you start with a basic explanation or visual representation of a concept. And we know that students have served these prerequisites. And often we have students from very, very diverse backgrounds. And so we start with building a basic intuition. And on building on that intuition, you can use these visual representations to convey the key idea of the concept, right? And then building on that key idea using equations or using maths is easier than if you just throw in the equations at once and then you expect the students would be they won't be feeling good, right?
So there's the takeaway that I was hoping you would get to for us, and that's I'll just rephrase it if I may, and that's, you know, you're talking about connecting, right? So you're talking about helping students to connect to something that might be foreign to them, right? By helping them to connect to, it could be prior knowledge or using diagrams, pictures, something that is a way in, right? As accessible to students. Now, we do this in other disciplines as well. Some people who use photos or videos or scenarios, cases, those kinds of things that can help students make that connection to whether it's a theory or whether it's a, you know, a problem you're solving in math. You pick it, but that is right there to what we know about the science of learning and how people learn and make connections, right? So we got there, Zubair. Thank you so much. I'm going to let you off the hook for now, but we may circle back to you as well. Thanks a lot. Okay, next up, we have our third faculty member, Momin. Are you all ready to go?
Yep, okay.
Okay.
Right, so you can see my screen, you can hear me, right?
Yes, you are loud and clear and your presentation is clear.
All right, so I don't have slides prepared. I am just going to show you some of the things that I wanted to talk about. So what I'm going to talk about is applicable to online classes. So those of you who actually record your lectures, this may be useful. And what this is using YouTube's chapters feature or the bookmarks feature, the timestamps feature. Let me give you a little bit of context of why I started using them. So back in 2019, spring of 2020, when we first went online, the first course that went online, we started doing some asynchronous sort of teaching, which was we used to record lectures, modules, about 20 minutes each, put them up online and ask the students to review them or to view them. And then we used to have a discussion session afterwards. And the reason why we did those smaller modules was because when they're viewing stuff online, I mean, there's this short attention spans and all of that stuff. So we said, let's divide it up into smaller modules. That would help getting our message across. But one of the key feedbacks that we received was that the students were daily missing the live interaction that there is in the lectures. So it was, I think, for 2020 when, as a department, we decided that most of our courses are now going to be live. And because we wanted that interaction with the students, and we're going to record those lectures and put them up online so that people could view them offline as well. But then the lectures were 1 hour, 15 minutes. The recordings were 1 hour, 15 minutes. And when we put them up for students to review them, you know, I mean, if they wanted to review a particular concept out of that lecture, I mean, I didn't want them to view the entire 1 hour, 15 and try to search where to look for what they were looking for. So that's where I started using YouTube and its timestamps feature, which essentially allows you to do a soft splitting of your lecture. So I would record the lecture and then review it in my own time immediately after the lecture, and provide these timestamps, if you will. So what you're seeing right now is one of the the LMS pages on my courses from spring 2021. And if I just, for example, click one of these, so this is the third lecture that there was in the semester. And let me pull this up. Right, so this is a 1 hour, 18 minutes lecture, which is now divided up into chapters, if you will. So give me a moment. Right. So this is chapters in the sense that if you go to the video description now provides bookmarks to each and every one of the portions that there are inside the lecture. And the students could just go through these, browse through these. For example, if they wanted to learn about the discrete time shifting property, they don't have to view the entire lecture again. They just click on this, and it would take them directly to where this concept was particularly, right? So this is the discrete time shifting property, and you can also view what the contents were on this slider window as well. Now this has, I think, aided our class discussions a whole lot. So for instance, just to give you an example, so this LMS page by itself provides us soft slating for the students. They can review what lecture covered what content. They can review that, and the class discussions as well. So if I can quickly, so this is the Slack page for our course in spring 2021 session, and so this is the homework page, and the student asked me, can someone share the answer of question? I made some assumptions for this period that I'm not sure of, and I wanted to help the student and point the student to where I talked about something relevant in the class. So I just provided the student with this link, and just clicking this link essentially opens up the exact point where this particular concept was discussed. And YouTube would allow you to create those bookmarks and put them anywhere you want. So I'm not talking about how. I can maybe perhaps I can spend another session on how this is done. But essentially, this gives you navigable links, right? And provides students with easy access to the things that they were looking for. Yeah, so that's about it. So I think I've spent less than 5 minutes. Have I?
That's great. That's great. Thank you, Momin. I absolutely love this tool. I didn't know you could do this. And the first thing I'm thinking of is like, wow, way to use a tool that students already know really well and probably look at every single day of their lives, right? Like, yeah. I mean, who isn't on YouTube?
One of the way I came across this is essentially YouTube itself. I was watching a YouTube video and I saw something down here. I don't know what it was, and just stumbled upon it.
Very cool. I think there's a lot of features that I mean, we could dive into with something like YouTube, right? That we don't even know exists. It has a lot of pedagogical possibilities, I think. So you've nicely demonstrated one here that seems, but I'm going to open up the questions with a question for you, and then we'll turn it over to others. What can you tell me? Can you tell me a bit more about the impact that this has had on your students, Momin? I mean, you mentioned the things you notice it helps them to do, but have you heard anything from them about this?
So, I mean, I would sort of echo Hadia's comments here. There were some explicit feedback from a few students. I mean, that's not statistically significant though. And the few students that did reach out to me specifically pointed out to this feature, that this has helped them in navigating through and reviewing the material, especially before the exams, especially before the homework problems are due. I mean, that's just a few students. I'm not sure. So we would have to do another survey for this.
Well, that sounds like a wonderful pedagogical research activity for you right there, Momin, you know, if you're interested. Hint, hint. No, you don't have to worry. Just to everyone, don't worry about being statistically significant or anything like that when you're talking about student feedback in this particular session. We just want to get a sense from all of you, like, are you finding that this is working well generally, right? So that's great to know that you have had some unsolicited feedback from students that they appreciate this. Questions from the group? We still have a few minutes left with moments. So anyone have any questions about the features of what he's doing here, or just some of the pedagogy behind what he's doing as well?
So if we do have time, Lana, I can follow up with some of things that Zubair mentioned as well, connecting math to experience.
You have another couple minutes, so yeah,
so,
go ahead.
I mean, I just want to follow it up what Zubair was mentioning. I mean, you need to connect math to experiences. I mean, that's how you basically really learn mathematics, and visualization is an extreme tool in there. Another one I've regularly used in a course and a fresh course as well is to use the hearing to try to make sense of what mathematical transformations do. So just to give you an idea, right? So I just play.
प्यारे बच्चों, मेरी आवाज सुनो और सुनते चले जाओ.
So this is a page. This is an article that I wrote for the students with some audio signals on there, just to try to explain that when I talk about a certain mathematical expression in the class, what does it actually correspond to visually? All right, so this is the visual. I mean, this was the original signal, and this is what's expansion and compression. But then you can hear it as well, right? So if I compress it, right? So I mean, that's sort of something that we can connect with. And there's lots of mathematical theory behind it. There's lots of mathematical insights that they could think about. I mean, there's some observations that when I compress it, it becomes funny in the sense that it becomes shriller, and you can use a lot of theory to explain that. So trying to explain that theory with experiences, just to follow up with Zubair's as well.
Excellent. I honestly didn't know that hearing math was a thing, so I've learned something. That's fantastic. Thank you. And I just want to point out that a moment you've made a really nice connection to something that Zubair started off with. It's about how we know learning works, and some of the things you're doing in your teaching to help students to learn. And one of them is you're clearly helping students to organize knowledge here through this YouTube feature, right? And organize the knowledge that you as an expert might have. And sometimes we forget that students don't have that same level of expertise. So we do need to help them to learn how to organize knowledge as well, and then to make those connections that Hadia and Zubair were saying. So this is another great practical way to do that. And I think some people mentioned in the chat box about using concept maps. I see Syed Tariq did that, and brainstorming sessions and things like that. Exactly. So thank you. We have 2 questions. Whose hand? Okay, I'm just trying to make Mehak Nadeem, go ahead, and then Antonio, you follow up.
Hello, ma'am. How are you?
Good,
how are you doing?
Welcome.
Okay, my question is from Momin. Actually, I'm just a little bit curious about the metaphorical representation. We have learned that the metaphorical representation of a concept makes the learning fast and long term. So in maths and science, if we are going for the metaphorical representation of a certain concept, how can we make it, or how can we find it? Can anybody guide over here?
I'm sorry, I couldn't completely get the question. Laura, did you?
So yeah, Mahik, I think we had, did we lose her?
No, she's here.
So you didn't get my question?
Yeah,
Actually, so I have just read about or researched about the learning instruments and tools in which I found metaphorical representations that the great teachers have used this different metaphors to elaborate a concept so that we can use it in our real life and in applications. So my question is, how can we find the metaphorical representation or the metaphors for our certain concepts on the Google or on internet or even the teachers? How can we go for and how do you use them? That's what my question is, and I'm curious about.
Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure what is meant by metaphorical representations. I mean, the way I teach mathematically intensive courses, so I view them as feeling maths in another domain, right? So that would help you visualize that in your head.
Exactly. So I have searched about a lot. Like, for example, let me give you an example. Like, we can use the metaphor like Earth is round like a ball. So here we are just representing the Earth like a ball. It's a metaphor for it. Yeah, likewise, I was just curious about the complex concepts. If I will get some guidelines, so that's what I was.
Yeah. So I mean, I often use technology and magic, right? So Arthur C. Clarke, right? So that's a quotation that I often use. I mean, these life lessons page is also sort of similar, where I try to connect. There might be something. Actually, this is not too. So Slack I have a life lessons page. So there's a metaphor that I can show you quickly. Right. So this one. Right, the shortest distance is a straight line, but it may not be the fastest route. So if life gives you a curves and bends, you current online semester, for instance, it is actually accelerating to your destination. And this is actually scientific. It's a scientific demo. It's called the Brachiosturon Curve. See, I mean, we sort of are fed the narrative that straight line is the shortest curve. It may not be so. So I think maybe that's a metaphor that I use as a life lesson for my students, not particularly connected to the course. I'm not sure if that answered the question.
So thank you so much for your collaboration.
Thanks for your question, Mihak. And I think I really like that you brought metaphors into it, because I think there's probably a lot of us here in different disciplines who use metaphors a lot in our teaching. So a great point. I'm really glad you asked that question. Okay, Antonio, last question for a moment goes to you before we move to Tariq.
So thank you. I was wondering if you are teaching on Zoom, whether it is a smooth process to blend Zoom with YouTube. I mean, you record your lecture on Zoom, and then you make it become a YouTube video with all these bookmarks, and then you just post the links on the LMS so that you don't need to have too much space being occupied by your videos, right?
Yes, that's and that's a simple process. I mean, I think that takes about an hour or two for YouTube to process your video, a 1 hour video, and it's just a simple click of a button. That's it. But then you would need to actually review the entire recording once again to add the time. So that's overhead that you would have to.
So the overall total time needed for this, for one lecture, how long would it take? About 2 hours, 2-3 hours?
Yeah, you can have your TAs do it.
Right.
So I mean, as far as adding the bookmarks are concerned, perhaps a TA could help you.
Okay.
But I mean, all of this, I didn't use any TA for this. I wanted to do it myself. But I think good TAs might be a good resource for it.
That's a great idea, Moment. And also, I think a testament to you probably get quicker at it over time, right? The more you do something like this and get used to the technology, like anything, get better with over time. So thanks Antonio, thanks Moment again. All right, folks, we are at our second last presenter today. Tariq, are you ready to go?
Yeah.
All right. So over to Dr. Tariq.
Okay, just Tariq.
Okay, over to just Tariq.
So I would like to share a general strategy I have been using over the last so many years. My challenge teaching biology was how to inspire students and how to make it fascinating, because 11 years ago when I came to LMS, most of the time I used to hear that, there's a lot of reading involved there and it's boring, etc. And we have to learn a lot of facts. So I thought of, building courses in such a way that whatever I'm going to teach, students should be able to question that. They should be able to link with the big questions in the field. And then while they are learning the fundamentals of a particular subject, a particular course, they learn how to define and refine big questions. And by defining and refining big questions, I mean literally developing critical thinking throughout the course. Every 2 or 3 lectures, they should raise some big questions. And while teaching those fundamentals, I should be integrating and incorporating seminal research papers, seminal discoveries. So it's more like a story. I teach like a story. Like these are big questions in my field. Like, each one of us, how do we develop? We all develop from single cell, but now our body contains more than 200 different cell types. So there's a list of questions, and that's my challenge, that's my ambition, that's my passion, that my students learn defining these questions. Not only defining, then they should start thinking about how can they devise a strategy to answer one of these questions. So all the courses I teach at LMS, my desire is, or my strategy is that they should be learning hows, whys, and why nots. Hows will be mostly learning fundamentals, then reasoning it, and then when they will ask why not, they will actually start questioning that particular truth or fact and they will start designing a particular experiment. I just take first question and we go through that first question so that you get an idea. I think this is the only slide which is without any image. So my slides are always full of images. I use a lot of videos. I use, less cluttered slide. This is the most cluttered slide in my life. So for example, this is a slide which will be throwing a question to students. And usually I ask them, can you identify what this question is when they're sitting in a course? Even if they don't have any idea on day one, I ask them, guess what it is, because and this slide shows the sperm cells. This is the day one of each one of us, where a sperm cell is trying to fertilize the egg cell. And when I start a course, I make it a point that I should cover certain degree of history of that particular subject or that particular course. For example, on the left, there is a slide which is 1,000 years old, where people imagined that, we come ready-made, we come fully developed in the sperm head. And these two pictures, I think they leave an impression in students' mind. How our subject started, like this picture, which turned out wrong, and the latest one where sperm is trying to fertilize egg, will leave an impression that this is the day one in a life? How do we develop from single-celled embryo? It doesn't stop there. I draw parallels. I tell students, okay, we all are living organisms, but we all start from simple beginning. We all look same more or less on day one, but then we develop very differently. How? So I leave these questions, and we have this conversation going on in my class. I ask them to think about their ideas. How do we develop differently than if we have very simple, more or less similar looking beginning, but then we develop very differently? How this complexity is developed. I show you a video here if I can. And can you see the video now?
Yes. Yeah.
So here, starting from single cell, you can see now cells are dividing. They start moving. On the right, this is the bottom view. This is the top view. This is a fish, zebra fish developing. And cells are organizing themselves. I leave them with a question. Think about how cells organize themselves. And I know there are many students in my courses which are with very strong math background. Here, look, this is the head region is formed. This is head region, and this is the backbone of the abdomen part of the fish. And this is the central. So cells got organized. I leave my students and I try to inspire them, in particular the math ones, to think about how cells organize themselves. So within biology, I try to inspire them, and I try to show them, think about integrating math there if they can. So I changed my. Do you see the previous slides? Why I don't? Yeah. Then look at these images. I throw a question. Each living organism has DNA, and the flow of information is from DNA to another cousin molecule of DNA to eventually protein, and we develop like this. Now, the question we learn together with students is, if flow of information, the process is same, if molecule, which is the DNA, is same, why we develop differently? And then within the same species, for example, humans, why we have different eye colors developing? Why we have, different skin colors in dogs? I mean, the questions are, and all this is within the same course. And the ultimate theme is that these students, they start thinking themselves and start defining questions instead of just going back and trying to learn facts which were discovered in last 100 years. And ultimate aim is that, okay, once they learn this, then they should start designing experiments. They should try to mimic how people answered these questions. I found it very useful for me as a scientist, because this gives me an opportunity to integrate not only my own research, but to produce future scientists. I think this teaching biology can be very challenging. Teaching this course can be very boring, but the way I have tried to do is, for example, here, again, you see sperm being, egg cell being fertilized with sperm, and then showing different images that, you have beautiful babies there, but all of them are different. Yet they contain same 46 chromosomes. So 23 chromosomes came from my father, 23 from mother, but they all develop differently. Yet they develop as humans, not as kittens or pups. So what are the concepts behind? Then I show them the process of development. Look, this is a big question in our field, and this is what I try to inspire them, that all of us start from here, as a single cell. And in first 3 weeks, the identity of different cells we carry in our body, that is fully determined. Once it is determined, they are maintained throughout our life till our death. Eye cells, they become determined in first 2 weeks. And they don't look like eyes at that particular time. How they are maintained? Each cell type, all those 200 different cell types, they contain same set of chromosomes. How they are different? So I use metaphors like, keys of piano. They are like, same set of genes, but using same genes, you can play different symphonies, and different cell types will have different symphonies being played while each cell contains same set of chromosomes. So this is how I try to make biology interesting. I talked about drawing parallels. I show them fruit fly, my favorite organism, which is the organism I use at LMS. But then I show them, look, what we discovered in flies is true in humans as well. So from head to tail, from head to the terminal of the abdomen in fly, the genes, the processes, the tools, they are fully conserved in mammals, in humans, in mouse. The way genes are fired, the way genes are switched on. Switching on means just light bulb is switched on or light bulb is switched off. It's conserved. So drawing these parallels across organisms helps me a lot. Using a lot of visuals, incorporating videos within the lectures, because I know I have only 28 lectures in a course, and in each course, I want students to learn defining questions, and I give them regular assignments. I give them questions, and while doing this, this is another, organization of cells. So that where my cursor is, this is time point 0 or 1 hour of development, and here it's 10. From here to here, it's 10 days. The complexity is being generated. And I bring the seminal discoveries, the research papers, one after another, and the assignments or questions within the class. I do practice questions within the class. After every 2 lectures, I say, okay, let's try defining a questions. And we then will answer using different approaches. Why and why not? This is, I think, the last slide. For example, I show them this is normal head in the flies. Why we always have eyes on the head? Why we have antennas on the head? Why can't we have legs on the eyes or legs on the head? Why can't we have, eyes somewhere else in the body? And while teaching this, we learn big concepts and you see, we have legs on the head, we have eyes on the legs. So these are legs on the head. This is the normal head. So while teaching this, we integrate the experimental approaches. They literally start learning how to design an experiment. Although they are going to reproduce the same experiment using their own devised approach, but by the time they reach end of their junior year with me, they do pretty good experimental design. So their research skills, they start developing. For example, another parallel, genes which are responsible for, proper legs always at the place of legs and not instead of eyes, are conserved in flowers as well. So the pattern organization of body parts of flowers, the same genes are involved, which were found in flies and in humans. So they are conserved. So the take-home message is, if I can inspire them to think independently, question what I am teaching them and try to reproduce answers the way they were answered in last 50 years, last 40 years. If they start learning how to read research paper, and I don't give them a lot. For example, at sophomore level, I give just one research paper. That's how I think their scientific skills, their critical thinking skills will develop. I think that's all.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Tariq. Wow. If only my high school and university instructors made biology as cool as you do. Seriously, I can see why your students have such positive feedback for you. Thank you for sharing this. And there's a lot in there that you shared through example, like the power of using visuals and getting people to integrate, integrating experiments in here. And you made the point about, you said learning together with students, right? I picked that up on what you said there. And you're really giving us a nice example of how you're creating a culture of thinking in your classroom. And I think that's what we all aspire to do, no matter what our discipline, right? So thanks so much for sharing that. Folks, what I'm going to ask you to do is, if you have a specific question for Tariq, just to put it in the chat box for now, because we're running kind of short on time, and our last presenter is here with us, Ali. So we want to give Ali his kind of full 5 to 7 minutes here. So Mihak, is this a question that you could possibly put in the chat box that Dr. Tariq Tariq could interact with you in there?
Okay, so I'm supposed to put in the chat box?
If you can, and then we can keep the conversation going while Ali gets ready. Okay?
All right.
Thanks. Thank you so much. And that goes for anyone else too. Just pop it in the chat, and Tariq, if you don't mind just jumping in. Okay, Ali, thank you for joining us. We're so happy that you're able to make it. And over to you. And please, I know it's 6:14, but take your full time that you planned for. And I encourage people to hang on, because I'm sure this is going to be a great little session with Ali. So over to you.
Thank you, Lorna. I really appreciate it. My apologies as well for being late. I was tied up at the doctor's. I don't have a presentation, but what I'll do is I'll speak about 3, I think, distinct points regarding assessments that I've learned over the years. And let me just say that all of my colleagues are very tough acts to follow. I mean, I was really kind of deeply interested in what they had to say. So I guess the first thing that I would like to focus on is the collaborative nature of assignments. And I say that because, over the years, I've found out that students work best in, communally as a community, as opposed to, sending in individual kind of like assignments. And so over the years, what I've developed is that a large chunk of my grading scheme, it involves, these tiny assignments, or micro assignments, as I like to think of them, which are usually in the shape of blogs, and every class of mine has a blog spot. And so, that blog space works as a discussion forum. It works as a space where I ask students to respond to prompts, and those blogs are anywhere from between 500 to 700 words. And that's an opportunity for students not just to see what their peers are thinking about, but it's also a space for them to kind of like learn from each other, and obviously to comment on each other's kind of reflections and contributions. The second thing that I would like to that I've transitioned to increasingly over the years is taking seriously the question of medium. And then this goes back to what Zubair, Mohamed, and Tariq Saab pointed out, which is to say that the students that we teach increasingly they are used to very different mediums. So usually in history, which is what I teach, one would imagine the textual to be the primary medium. But many of our students are more used to visual and sonic mediums on top of textual. So I encourage students to also use the visual and the sonic in addition to the textual in their prompts, in their assignments, in their submissions. And that is linked to the third point that I wanted to make, which was that in the projects that I have, I give students the option of choosing which form or which genre they would like to submit their assessments in, their submissions in. So over the years, aside from essays, superb essays, I've had poetry, I've had fiction, I've had Instagram essays, Twitter threads. I've had even a mixtape, which I'm happy to post actually in the comment box in case anyone wants to listen to it afterwards. And it was made by an aspiring musician who is now a rapper of sorts. And it's a 10-minute long mixtape, but it took the entire semester to make. And this fed off not just the prompt that I gave them by way of their final assignment, but also things that they had learned over the course of the semester. I've also had sculptures, I've had paintings, and so on. But my one kind of, in some ways, condition for that is that students have to explain why they think that this particular form or genre is the best form or genre for them to submit their assignment or assessment in. So in some ways, they have to make the case for why this particular form is best suited for what they want to say. I've even had, by the way, students submitting in fantastic digital visualizations, doing things in digital history and digital humanities, which is where the field is also headed. And so that allows students to give space, to themselves by way of creative expression, to kind of like experiment with different forms, and also to kind of discover other interests and to inspire other students as well. The one thing that I do, the one thing, and the thing that I appreciate about this format, as I've learned over the course of trial and error, is that it makes students also, it also makes students as producers of knowledge instead of simply being, recipients of it. And so those Instagram essays, they become public, other kind of students also engage with it, and so on, as do, these music, videos and so on. And the final thing that I suppose that I would like to point out, and this again goes back to what Momin and Zubair Saab also mentioned, and Tariq Saab too. I'm sorry I wasn't here for Hadia's presentation. I apologize for that. But what it does is that it also kind of encourages them without us having to force them. It also encourages them to think about how the abstract concepts they learn in the classroom apply it to their everyday. It's almost like the different form of the different genre in which they're submitting their assignments or assessments encourages them to make that connection, which is to think about how conceptual knowledge becomes applied knowledge and how it speaks to, at least in what I teach, how it speaks to, the world that they inhabit and the world that they come to understand. And this is important for me, especially because history is, something that is seen with a lot of distrust, especially in Pakistan. It's a subject that students learn to dislike in their school because it's composed of rote learning. And so part of the challenge in teaching history in Pakistan especially is to encourage students to step out of their instinctive dislike for history and learn actually to love it. And thinking of those various ways in which students can also produce history in different forms and different formats in different genres, I think is a great way of actually engaging with students and also, encouraging them to realize that they're also producers of history instead of simply being, recipients of it. I think I'll end there, but that was what I wanted to touch kind of like base on.
Thank you so much, Ali. Wow. You jammed a lot of good stuff in there. So thanks for that. And I really like some of the additions. You have echoed a lot of what our colleagues were saying, but then really gave us food for thought about variety of forums and formats that students can do assessments. I am a true believer in that as well. And it creates more interest for students too when they're doing something they really want to do. But the key thing I think you're talking about too is rigor. Is there rigor behind the assignments? And I really like this idea of explaining why you want to use a forum. I want to make a video because it's easy, right? Like, I mean, that's some students will take that option, but I really like that addition. There's a couple of key things that Tariq and both Ali talked about, and that's questions and you mentioned about prompting. Tariq, you gave us examples of prompting. And just very quickly, Ali, in your best 30-second description or explanation, tell us about the importance of good prompts for students.
Should I go first?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, but Tariq, you can answer quickly as well if you'd like to. So Ali first, yeah.
Right. So I tend to make my prompts very brief, sometimes a word, that's it. And that word is a way of encouraging them to think creatively. And that sometimes also kind of intimidates students because they're more used to kind of like very precise guidelines when it comes to assignments. But what the prompt does, once they actually get comfortable with it, is it allows them to think really creatively about that one word or that 2 or 3 words in very different ways. And what that prompt does, once it's actually made available publicly to other students, is that it also encourages them to think, about other tangents. So sorry, there wasn't 30 seconds, and I think I'm going to hash this out as well.
I was just putting the pressure on and giving you some constraints, just because we are definitely, okay, I have to admit, I said I was doing the Pakistani thing by starting 5 minutes late, and now I'm totally doing the Pakistani thing by going overtime. I know that's a thing, so, so pardon me. And no, and I say that with a lot of love, not to complain. I do. Okay, so folks, I think we need to just pause it here because we could be, we're a bunch of teachers in a virtual room. And if I know anything about teachers in a room, we could talk for hours and hours and hours about the kind of stuff we're talking about. I hope that everyone got some kind of piece of a new idea, a piece of advice. We recorded this, so go back and look at it and pick up on some of those great, tidbits of what you heard from today from these 5 exceptional teachers that we were so lucky to have with us today. So I'm going to, unless there's anything else that anyone else needed to ask or say, I'm going to end it in one way. So each of the teachers here, there's 5 of you, right? What is in your best 30 seconds, or no, let's make this 15 seconds. What is your one piece of advice for instructors who may want to try to better engage their students this semester? So a very quick, what would you say your go-to would be for student engagement?
So they should try to encourage conversation in the class. So have a good conversation. Think about the conversation points for each lecture.
Perfect. I think question prompts come in there somewhere too as good conversation points. So excellent. Who's next? I'm just looking at who I see. Zubair.
We should take care of weak students in our classes.
Excellent. Kind of be looking after everyone. Who's Hadia, Momin, or Ali? What's your piece of advice for how to engage students this fall? Go ahead, Ali.
I can go.
Okay, Hadia.
Be mindful of burnout.
Yeah. Great. Be mindful of burnout. Think about balance, right? Ali or Momin?
Try to learn from your students while you're teaching.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah.
I'm thinking of what else to add after all of this, but I would also, but I suppose what I would add is that, encourage, that's for me as well, encourage students to think about their world, their immediate context. And sometimes what we learned is divorced from our surroundings and where we live. And so that is always kind of useful to think about as well for students.
Excellent. I think that really sums up a common thread through all of your presentations today is this: how can we help students to connect, right? Without just throwing things at them and making them fearful of math, biology, economics, or history, or whatever you happen to be teaching. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for your time and staying a little bit over time during this busy time when you're all getting ready. Best of luck this semester to everyone